But strangely enough, there is left in the world today an area as big as the United States
that's never been seen by a human being.
The best is yet to come. Oh, this event happened. Why? Because you have too much freedom and liberty. So give that all up, and now you'll be safe. And it'll be the exact same model for the internet. Give all that up, and you can have the internet back.
Houston, we have a call.
We destroyed that technology.
People should not be walking around with masks.
That stuff is flat.
There's your flu
last year.
Here's your flu this year.
Literally doesn't. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Hibbeler Effect. And today on the show is Rockfin's very own From Jay's Analysis. He's with InfoWars. He's a great author. Go check his books out. Links will be in the description, guys. Welcome to the Hibbeler Effect, Jay Dyer. Thanks for the time, brother.
Thanks, dude. Glad to be here. Appreciate you reaching out, and I noticed your name popping up there on Rockfin, so it's cool to finally chat.
Yeah, it is, man. And, you know, I have communication with Rockfin people here and there, and they're always preaching, hey, Rockfin people, let's stick together. Let's maybe interview each other, get to know one another. So I'm like, that's a perfect opportunity. I just saw you on Sam's show, and that was a great show. And obviously, I produce Eddie's show, look into it. So when you were on there with Sam, that was a banger. I think that's like top 5 Rockfin video of all time, you know? So
yeah, it was wild. I didn't know what to expect, and Eddie was as wild as I did expect. So
oh yeah, Eddie, it's a great show too, man, and he really can fluctuate. You have a great show too on Rockfin, Jay's Analysis. How long have you been doing that show?
Well, I've been doing my own kind of material and podcast for maybe 10 years. Rockfin, I guess, for about 2 years now. So yeah, it's been a long, weird road. I mean, it started out as an old blog covering libertarian conspiracy topics. Then it morphed into mainly a lot of movie analyses for many, many years. And then I got back into the geopolitical conspiracy stuff maybe in the last 7 or 8 years. So it's kind of just snowballed, and it began with movies in its modern form, and then turned into just all these different things. We do a lot of religious debates. I got 2 big Muslim debates coming up. So so we do all kinds of stuff now. It's like 5 different things now. You know, we do movies, we do geopolitics, we do debates, we do comedy content, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and I would advise anybody to go check that out if you're interested in those topics, or if you just want to learn about those topics, because this guy's been doing the research, he's been putting in the time. And, everybody in my audience knows where my research has been for many, many years. And now I'm kind of opening up my horizon for other topics and trying to figure out, what kind of other films can I produce? What kind of other things do the people want? And Jay's been covering a lot of these topics. He's a good source to go and get some information, especially when it comes to like current events with World Economic Forum, BlackRock, Vanguard, Bilderberg, any of that type of stuff. This guy is a genius, in my opinion, the way, to me, Santos Bonacci would be a genius with astrotheology. It's like, that's his expertise. This is Jay's expertise. And I wanted to, while we're on YouTube, sharing this preview for the first 20 minutes or so, I'm going to keep it a little clean. But let's maybe do some of those analyses on some films. And again, these aren't going to be probably too hard for you, but I always had a few in mind, because I know when you were on Eddie's show, you guys were going over some films, and as a producer, I'm kind of silent. Now I'm a little bit more talkative on his show and shit, but back then I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, come on, I want to hear Hunger Games. Hunger Games is always my favorite, because for me, Jay, it's my favorite. Call it what it is. I know, guys, don't support Hollywood, don't support this, don't support that. But in terms of gun to my head, pick a Hollywood series or film or something that you like. Okay, it's Hunger Games. It's all of them. I like them all equally, but I know you got to be retarded, to not think that there's something behind that film and that series. Jay, again, I'm sure this isn't a hard one for you, but I want to know. I'm gonna be selfish on my show today. So what kind of, we can all see it from a broad aspect, of like what they're doing with the Hunger Games, but I'm sure it's deeper. No?
I think it is. I think that movie, the books came out at a time when there was a whole host of young adult fiction that was programming us for dystopia, right? I mean, it was like, there was Divergence, there was Hunger Games. There was just this whole spew of these things coming out in the early 2010s. And the theme for I've read the first one. I didn't read the whole trilogy, but I enjoyed the first one. And I was noticing some surprising things in those novels, which they did put into the film a little bit, the trilogy. One of those was staged in fake news. Oh. And so, so basically, there's a point where Katniss, they start running the Empire starts running these fake news programs to make her look bad. And I always thought that was odd that they would have that, but that goes back in fiction, back to Running Man. Back in the 1980s, they had Jesse Ventura in The Running Man with Arnold, right? And they had this completely CGI created news story that they ran on the news channel in that dystopian story, if you've seen it. And they basically do the same thing with Katniss in Hunger Games. And that comes up actually in a lot of films. It's in Wag the Dog, which is a really good movie if you haven't seen that, about how there's a close connection between the CIA and Hollywood. They actually made a movie about the connection between CIA and Hollywood. And if you watch it, the Robert De Niro character in that, he's very similar to some of these what they call liaisons between the CIA and Hollywood. So there's Milt Bearden and Chase Brandon are a couple of those famous figures. And they basically tell the studios, hey, here's what we would do as, if you want to portray the CIA in this way or that way. And hey, maybe you should tweak the screenplay a little bit and give us a better image, this kind of stuff, right? So propaganda liaison in a way. And you see the same thing in Hunger Games. Now, I don't know a whole lot about Suzanne Collins herself, so I haven't looked into her background to see what her views are. Maybe she was just taking pop culture stuff and just sort of putting it out.
Probably read the book and then mix it with pop culture and tried to make a modern film on it. It's possible. I mean, who knows? There might be tie-ins with her. Again, you admitted you never looked into her. But in terms of the grasp of the theme of the film for the public, for the masses, what does it do, man? Because for me, you get mixed results with that film. It's kind of like, it's not really a love it or hate it film. Most people like those films, right? But at the same time, I feel like people take something from it differently. What I took from it quickly was just the simple fact that they're trying to show their cards in the sense of this is kind of how they want it, where they're in full control. They're in full control by division, meaning communities, by towns, cities, whatever you want to call it, districts. They basically use our life as a game, which they do in real life, mentally, not in the physical form like the film shows. But is that really them trying to say this is what we want? Because that's kind of a push. I feel like it's more about showing you the physical side of it, but in reality, it's all back here on Earth mental. But what's your thoughts?
To get into the actual narrative, you're right. I think that you could read it in two different ways. You could read it as a revelation of how they control us, because for those that don't know or recall, you have this near future America where there was some kind of big conflict, and out of that conflict, this revolution, there was a new, basically, world government. And the country is divided up into districts on the basis of kind of like a socialist style of what the Tennessee, Kentucky region, they're in charge of, I don't know what, coal or something like, some sort of mandated, nationalized or socialized production system. Yeah. And the whole country is laid out that way. The capital district is, basically the New World Order capital, you could say. So there's a lot of good aspects of the film in the sense of like portraying a lot of the degeneracy in culture ahead of time. If you notice, a lot of the styles and how people dressed back then with the colors and the social justice, purple hair, people eater stuff, like that was ahead of its time, because we see people dressing and acting the way that they did in Hunger Games now. But yeah, there's a lot going on in the sense of the centralized police state really keeps everybody down on the basis of a lot of propaganda. And one of the ways that they've realized they can control people is through channeling violence into these human sacrificial rituals, namely the gladiatorial games, the Hunger Games, is echoing ancient Roman, pagan society, where you would have these gladiatorial games that are intended to be a way for society to, again, channel their bread and circuses that channel their anger, the distrust. But there's also other things that I think go deeper in this story, like the fact that in the second and third installments, her revolution ends up being fake. Yeah. It's a controlled it's another control system. So she's anti-establishment from a genuine place. Yeah. But then she realizes that people like Julianne Moore, who are running her revolution, are using her, and they want her as a symbol for propaganda too. And then she ends up not wanting to be a part of that either. And I think that that's kind of a profound statement about how a lot of revolutions, you can go back to Anthony Sutton or Carol Quigley's work and how they talk about the Bolshevik Revolution being aided by Western elites, banking elites. So, there's some truth here. Again, to what degree we have her motives or Hollywood's motives. I never trust Hollywood's motives, but I do think that sometimes people make movies and sometimes good messages do come out, but it also could be that, no, this is actually just another way to condition you to the dystopian future that they want to bring about. Yeah, no, that's a great point, man. That's a great analysis, pun intended, I guess, man. Holy crap. I never heard it from that perspective in a sense, but what I also took from that film, if you want to touch upon before we switch over to Rockfin, is the fact that I got this sense of, especially in the second one, going into the third, where she could see that it was kind of controlled op in a sense where they're coming in. But then towards the end, I feel like she really did trust, what's his name? He passed away in real life. The gentleman in the film that kind of turned on the bad guy. I forgot his name. He passed in real life, but it seemed like she was trying to trust him in a sense. It seemed like she looked at him as a figure of, hey, you're turning on the system and you're going to help the revolution. Cause there was a moment in time and I do kind of get that feeling nowadays. And I'm not going to sit here and act like Trump's the biggest piece of shit in the world, cause I can name thousands that are worse, but I still look at that as like a Trump, that guy in that film where it's like, he's like, he doesn't really give a fuck either way, but he might as well pick the revolution because it looks like that's what the people want, and he wants to be liked by the people. He still wants full control and power, But it's like, hey, if the people like me, I'm cool with that, so I'll go on your team. And even though I was just with them, I know everything about the bad guys. So in the film, it's kind of like, can you trust him? And I feel like they're kind of swaying that, for me at least, kind of nowadays with the political charades. But again, I'm not a politic guy, so I'm a little biased with it. But that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, like you, I kind of get bored with the sort of the normie mainline politics. So I kind of checked out that a long time ago. I follow it here and there when it pops up, when it's relevant. But I think you're right to say that when it comes to politicians, a lot of these people can have multiple motives, multiple motivations. So not everybody's black or white, good or evil, right? You can have people that are kind of back and forth or mixed motivations. Like you said, maybe somebody just wants to ride the wave and their motivations aren't good, but they see that the tide is turning and that, the majority of people are now beginning to turn against all this crap. So, but regardless of we can still be positive in my view, because, you can never totally get rid of controlled opposition. There's always going to be people out there doing that. But if you've got people at that level, like a Trump or somebody like that, if they're having to speak our language, then that means that we're on the upswing. You know what I mean? I got into conspiracy stuff in 1998. So I was just coming out of high school, getting into that kind of stuff and reading about the UN and, kind of John Birch level stuff back then. And nobody was a conspiracy theorist. The internet was kind of fresh and new, and you could find a few message boards, but you couldn't really talk to people in any circles. You know what I mean? I was in evangelical church circles back then, and nobody would talk about conspiracy stuff. You'd have to go across the state to some other church, to some dude you met on a forum, and y'all could talk about conspiracy stuff, right?
It was so niche, man. It was
super niche, dude. And even after, there's these periods when there's really kind of breakthroughs. So then when Alex came out with Bohemian Grove, and then Burmis came out with Loose Change, that was a kind of a big swell, where you started to see a little rumblings. But again, even all the way through the Obama period and all that, it was just so.
Were you falling for the Obama shit? Originally?
No, I was
in Chicago, Jay. I was in Chicago. I born and raised there. So just seeing it in the Chicagoland was this was the Jesus, and it's
right.
And I was sitting here wait a minute, there's some, I just knew, because I was already awakened to 9/11 back then. So I knew, I didn't trust it. Did you trust it back then? Were you hey, look, finally someone that can make change?
No, I knew as soon as I watched Loose Change, I was questioning the Big 9 event, right? And I mean, I was.
Let's stop there. The Big 9 event. Let's head over to Rockfin. Everybody on YouTube, thanks for supporting me. Please go check out Rockfin if you want to hear the rest of the conversation. Thank you to Jay. Links are in the description. We'll see you over at Rockfin, guys.